The Academy Awards After Party, 1960. The Ambassador Hotel ballroom glowed with Hollywood glamour as the industry's biggest stars celebrated another night of cinematic achievement. Champagne flowed, camera bulbs flashed, and the atmosphere buzzed with that unique energy that only comes when power, fame, and alcohol mix in equal measures. In one corner stood John Wayne, 6'4" of American iconography, the Duke himself, fresh off another Western triumph and representing everything traditional Hollywood stood for. In another corner, Frank Sinatra held court, the chairman of the board surrounded by his Rat Pack entourage, representing the new, rebellious Hollywood that answered to nobody. The two men had been circling each other all night, their tension palpable to anyone paying attention. Then Frank made a comment about politics, loud, opinionated, and unapologetically liberal. John Wayne, his jaw clenched and his legendary temper rising, walked directly toward Frank and said in that unmistakable drawl, "Sinatra, shut your mouth. Nobody wants to hear your pinko politics at a celebration like this." The entire ballroom seemed to freeze. You could silence Frank Sinatra many things, but you couldn't silence him. Not in his town. Not in front of his friends. And certainly not with a dismissive command delivered like Frank was some nobody who needed to learn his place. What happened in the next 60 seconds nearly resulted in one of the biggest fistfights in Hollywood history and revealed the massive cultural divide tearing America apart. Before we reveal how Frank Sinatra responded and what stopped these two legends from destroying each other right there in front of Hollywood royalty, hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell. Drop a comment telling us whose side you would have been on, John Wayne or Frank Sinatra. Now let's see what happened when American traditionalism collided head-on with the new guard of Hollywood rebellion. To understand why this confrontation was inevitable and why it nearly exploded into violence, you need to understand what John Wayne and Frank Sinatra represented in 1960 America. Not just as entertainers, but as symbols of two completely different visions of what America should be. John Wayne, born Marion Morrison in Iowa, had become the living embodiment of American masculinity and traditional values. By 1960, he was 53 years old and had been a major movie star for over 2 decades. His films, Stagecoach, Red River, The Searchers, Rio Bravo, defined the Western genre and presented a vision of America built on rugged individualism, clear moral boundaries, and unquestioning patriotism. But John Wayne wasn't just an actor playing roles. He genuinely believed in the conservative, traditionalist values his characters represented. He was vocally anti-communist at a time when the Cold War dominated American politics. He supported the House Un-American Activities Committee's investigations into Hollywood. He believed in traditional gender roles, American military power, and the kind of patriotism that never questioned government authority. Duke, as everyone called him, carried himself with the same commanding presence off-screen that he displayed on-screen. He was physically imposing, 6'4", broad-shouldered, with a voice that could silence a room without raising it. When John Wayne walked into a space, people noticed. When he expressed an opinion, people listened. And when he felt disrespected, his temper could be explosive. Frank Sinatra, at 44, represented everything John Wayne opposed about modern Hollywood and modern America. Born in Hoboken, New Jersey, to Italian immigrant parents, Frank had clawed his way from poverty to become not just a successful entertainer, but a cultural force who refused to bow to anyone's expectations. By 1960, Frank was at the height of his powers. His musical comeback in the 1950s had been spectacular. His film career was thriving with an Academy Award for From Here to Eternity under his belt. He'd formed the Rat Pack with Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, a group that represented a new kind of American masculinity, cosmopolitan, racially integrated, sexually liberated, and politically liberal. Frank was unapologetically democratic in his politics. He'd campaigned for Franklin D. Roosevelt, supported civil rights causes at a time when that was professionally dangerous, and was currently one of John F. Kennedy's most visible celebrity supporters. Frank believed in integration, workers' rights, and challenging the conservative establishment that men like John Wayne represented. More than his politics, Frank represented cultural rebellion. He drank openly, had highly publicized affairs, associated with controversial figures, and refused to conform to the wholesome image that Hollywood traditionally demanded of its stars. He was the anti-Duke, sophisticated where Wayne was traditional, urban where Wayne was frontier, questioning where Wayne was certain. The two men had maintained an uneasy coexistence in Hollywood for years. They respected each other's professional success, attended the same industry events, and generally avoided direct confrontation. But America in 1960 was increasingly divided, and Hollywood reflected those divisions like a mirror. The 1960 presidential election was heating up. John F. Kennedy, young, Catholic, and liberal, was challenging Richard Nixon for the presidency. Frank Sinatra had thrown his considerable celebrity weight behind Kennedy, even producing a campaign anthem and hosting fundraisers. John Wayne, predictably, was firmly in Nixon's corner, viewing Kennedy as too young, too liberal, and too dangerous for America's security. The night of the confrontation, the Academy Awards ceremony had just concluded. John Wayne had presented an award, delivering his lines with that familiar drawl that had made him iconic. Frank had attended with several Rat Pack members, and they'd been holding court at the after-party, discussing Kennedy's campaign, civil rights, and the changing face of America. Frank, never one to moderate his opinions, especially after a few drinks, had been particularly vocal. "This country needs to change," he'd said loudly enough for surrounding tables to hear. "The old ways aren't working anymore. We need leaders who understand that America is more than cowboys and flag-waving. We need progress, we need integration, and we need to stop pretending like everybody who disagrees with us is a communist." The comment was clearly aimed at the conservative Hollywood establishment. People like John Wayne, who'd spent the 1950s supporting the blacklist and questioning the patriotism of anyone who expressed liberal views. Several people noticed John Wayne's expression darken from across the room. His friends saw his jaw clench, his hands tighten around his drink. The Duke had tolerated Frank's politics for years, but there was something about Frank's tone tonight, the dismissiveness toward cowboys and flag-waving, that felt like a personal insult to everything John Wayne stood for. What happened next was later described by witnesses as watching two freight trains heading toward each other on the same track. Everyone could see the collision coming, but nobody could stop it. John Wayne set down his drink with deliberate force and began walking across the ballroom. His path was direct, his intention clear. People in his way stepped aside quickly. When 6'4" of angry John Wayne was moving with purpose, you got out of the way. Frank was mid-sentence, making another point about Kennedy's vision for America, when he noticed the room's energy shift. Conversations around him died. People were looking toward something behind him. Frank turned and found himself face-to-face with John Wayne, whose expression was harder than granite. "Sinatra." John Wayne's voice carried that distinctive drawl, but underneath was steel. "Shut your mouth. Nobody wants to hear your pinko politics at a celebration like this." The word pinko, slang for communist sympathizer, landed like a punch. In 1960, with Cold War paranoia still running high, calling someone a pinko wasn't just an insult. It was an accusation that could still ruin careers and destroy reputations. Frank Sinatra's eyes narrowed. He was several inches shorter than Wayne and nowhere near as physically imposing, but Frank had never backed down from anyone in his life. He'd grown up fighting in the streets of Hoboken, he'd battled his way through the entertainment industry, and he certainly wasn't about to be silenced by John Wayne, no matter how iconic. "Excuse me?" Frank's voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that people who knew him recognized as more threatening than shouting. "Did you just call me a pinko?" "If the shoe fits," John Wayne replied, his voice loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "You and your Hollywood pals, always criticizing America, always finding fault with the greatest country on earth. You support Kennedy, you push for integration, you question authority. Sounds pretty pink to me." The Rat Pack members behind Frank immediately tensed. Dean Martin, who'd been lounging casually, straightened up. Sammy Davis Jr. moved closer to Frank's side. Peter Lawford, who was Kennedy's brother-in-law, looked particularly alarmed. This wasn't just about Frank anymore. Wayne's comments were attacking their entire group, their values, and their right to express political opinions. "Let me tell you something, Duke." Frank stepped forward, closing the distance between them until they were almost chest to chest. "I love America as much as you do. I've supported this country, I've entertained troops, I've paid my taxes, and I've used my success to fight for what I believe in. The difference between us is that I think America can be better, and you think questioning anything makes someone a traitor." John Wayne's face flushed red. "Better? You want to make America better by tearing down everything that made it great? By supporting politicians who want to give handouts to people instead of making them work? By pushing integration before the country's ready for it? The last comment drew audible gasps from several people in the crowd. Integration was the most explosive issue in America in 1960, and John Wayne had just openly suggested it was being pushed too fast. Sammy Davis Jr., the only black member of the Rat Pack standing right there, felt the comment like a physical blow. Frank's voice rose now, no longer controlled. Before the country's ready? Or before people like you are ready? Sammy here is one of the most talented entertainers in the world, but there are clubs that won't let him perform, hotels that won't let him stay, and restaurants that won't serve him. And your answer is not yet? Your answer is to wait until it's more convenient for racists. John Wayne pointed his finger at Frank's chest. Don't you dare question my character. I've made more films celebrating American values than you've had hit records. I've shown this country what honor, duty, and courage look like. And I won't stand here and let some saloon singer lecture me about America. The saloon singer comment was designed to diminish Frank, to reduce his entire career to something less significant than Wayne's film legacy. It worked exactly as intended. Frank's famous temper, usually kept under tight control in public, finally snapped. Saloon singer? Frank's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. At least I can actually sing. Your acting consists of walking stiff-legged through the same cowboy movie you've been making for 20 years. You want to talk about real talent? I've won an Oscar for acting. I've sold millions of records. I've built a career on actual skill, not just playing the same character over and over while pretending it's patriotism. The insults were escalating rapidly, and people in the ballroom were scrambling to either get closer to witness the confrontation or move away to avoid being caught in whatever explosion was coming. John Wayne's hands clenched into fists. You little punk. I ought to. You ought to what? Frank challenged, his own hands raised now. Hit me? Go ahead, Duke. Take your best shot. But remember, I've been in street fights since before you were playing dress-up in cowboy costumes. And unlike your movie fights, this one won't have a stunt coordinator to make you look good. The tension reached a breaking point. John Wayne drew back his fist, a genuine wind-up that made it clear this wasn't posturing anymore. Frank braced himself, and for one electric moment, it looked like Hollywood's two biggest icons were about to throw down right there in the Ambassador Hotel ballroom. Then Dean Martin did something that stopped everything. He stepped directly between them, his drink still in hand, his expression calm despite standing between two men ready to fight. Dean was one of the few people in Hollywood who commanded respect from both camps. He was Frank's best friend and Rat Pack partner, but he'd also worked with John Wayne and shared some of his more traditional values. Gentlemen, Dean's voice was steady, reasonable, the same tone he used on his variety show. You're about to do something really stupid that you'll both regret tomorrow. And more importantly, you're about to give every gossip columnist in Hollywood the story of the decade. The mention of gossip columnists penetrated both men's anger. A public brawl between John Wayne and Frank Sinatra wouldn't just be embarrassing. It would be a career-defining scandal that would follow both of them forever. Studios would be furious, insurance companies would panic, and both men's carefully crafted public images would be shattered. Frank, Dean said, turning to his friend. He's an old man set in his ways. You're not going to change his mind by punching him. Then Dean turned to John Wayne. Duke, he's a hothead from New Jersey who doesn't know when to shut up. You're not going to teach him respect by fighting him. The characterizations were insulting enough to both men that they created a strange moment of unity. Both Frank and John Wayne looked at Dean with expressions that said, seriously? But Dean's intervention had broken the momentum. Other people rushed forward now that the immediate danger had passed. Studio executives, other actors, even waiters who'd been frozen in fear began moving again. Cary Grant appeared at John Wayne's shoulder, placing a gentle but firm hand on his arm. Come on, Duke. He's not worth it. Peter Lawford did the same for Frank. Frank, Kennedy's watching. You think he wants his biggest celebrity supporter arrested for brawling at the Oscars party. The mention of Kennedy struck a chord with Frank. He was campaigning for Kennedy, representing him to millions of Americans. Getting into a fistfight, no matter how justified he felt, would hurt Kennedy's campaign and undermine everything Frank was trying to achieve politically. Similarly, John Wayne realized that fighting Frank Sinatra in front of dozens of witnesses and photographers would destroy his image as the dignified symbol of American values. His fans expected him to be above such behavior, to handle conflicts with the same stoic nobility his characters displayed on screen. Both men took a step back, though neither was willing to apologize or show any sign of backing down. This isn't over, John Wayne said, his voice still carrying menace. Anytime, anywhere, Frank shot back. But it was over, at least for that night. The two men were guided in opposite directions by their respective entourages. John Wayne left the party shortly after, his exit dramatic enough to make his point. Frank stayed, but moved to a private room where he could cool down away from the cameras. The near fight became Hollywood legend within hours. By the next morning, every newspaper in America had some version of the story. Wayne and Sinatra nearly come to blows over politics. Hollywood icons clash at Oscar party. Duke versus Chairman, battle of American ideals. But what most people didn't know was what happened 3 days later. John Wayne, after his anger cooled and he'd had time to reflect, did something surprising. He called Frank Sinatra. Not to apologize exactly, but to propose a truce. Both men agreed that their near fight had been foolish and that, despite their political differences, they could coexist in Hollywood without destroying each other. They never became friends. Their political differences were too fundamental, their worldviews too opposed. But they developed a grudging respect. Wayne for Frank's genuine patriotism despite his liberal politics, and Frank for Wayne's authentic commitment to his values, even if Frank disagreed with them. Years later, after both men had mellowed with age, they appeared together at a charity event. Someone asked about the legendary confrontation at the Ambassador Hotel. John Wayne smiled and said, "Frank and I disagreed about almost everything. Still do. But I respect that he stands up for what he believes in, even when he's wrong." Frank responded, "The Dukes got values from a century ago, but at least they're genuine values. In this business, that's rarer than you'd think." The confrontation between John Wayne and Frank Sinatra at the 1960 Academy Awards after-party represented something much larger than two celebrities having a heated argument. It was a crystallization of the massive cultural and political divide that was tearing America apart in the early 1960s. A divide that, in many ways, still exists today. John Wayne and Frank Sinatra weren't just arguing about politics or Kennedy versus Nixon. They were arguing about competing visions of America itself. Wayne represented traditional America, the frontier values, the clear moral boundaries, the belief in maintaining established social orders and hierarchies. Frank represented the emerging America, cosmopolitan, integrated, questioning, progressive, willing to challenge old assumptions. Neither man was entirely wrong, and neither was entirely right. That's the uncomfortable truth that the story reveals. John Wayne's traditionalism provided stability, clear values, and a connection to American history that many people found comforting during times of rapid change. His films gave audiences heroes who knew right from wrong, who stood up for principle, who embodied courage and duty. Those aren't bad values, even if Wayne's specific political positions often reflected the racial and social prejudices of his time. Frank Sinatra's progressivism pushed America toward greater equality, challenged unjust systems, and used celebrity platform to advocate for marginalized communities. His support for civil rights, his integration of the Rat Pack, his willingness to question authority. These were genuinely courageous stands in 1960, especially for someone with so much to lose professionally. The lesson from their near fight isn't that one was right and the other wrong. The lesson is about how we handle deep disagreements with people we respect but fundamentally disagree with. Both men made mistakes that night. John Wayne's decision to try to silence Frank, to dismiss his views as pinko, was an attempt to use intimidation to shut down legitimate political disagreement. Calling Frank a communist sympathizer wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to delegitimize his right to have different views. Frank's response, while understandable, also escalated the situation. Attacking Wayne's acting, calling his patriotism into question, and nearly fighting him solved nothing. It just created a spectacle that overshadowed any political points Frank was trying to make. Dean Martin's intervention showed a better path, acknowledging both men's right to their views while pointing out that violence wouldn't resolve anything. Dean understood something crucial. You can disagree with someone's politics without viewing them as your enemy. The phone call 3 days later, where both men agreed to a truce, revealed mature wisdom that's often missing in today's political discourse. They didn't change each other's minds. They didn't compromise their values. They simply agreed to coexist, to respect each other's right to different views, and to find common ground where possible while acknowledging unbridgeable differences elsewhere. This is the lesson most relevant to today's America, which often feels as divided as it was in 1960. We live in an era where political disagreements frequently result in severed relationships, social media battles, and the complete demonization of those who think differently. We see people as either allies or enemies with no middle ground. John Wayne and Frank Sinatra show us there's another way. You can think someone's political views are completely wrong while still respecting them as a person. You can disagree fundamentally about America's direction while acknowledging that both sides love the country and want what's best for it, even if they define best very differently. The near fight also reveals the danger of letting political disagreements become personal. When John Wayne called Frank a pinko and a saloon singer, when Frank attacked Wayne's acting ability and patriotism, they were no longer debating ideas. They were attacking each other's identity and worth. That's when productive disagreement becomes destructive conflict. Both men learned from the experience. In later years, they were more careful about how they expressed political disagreements, more willing to find common ground, and more likely to separate policy debates from personal attacks. The story also reminds us that America has always been divided. The idea that there was some golden age when Americans agreed on everything is a myth. In 1960, the country was splitting over civil rights, foreign policy, economic systems, and cultural values, just as it does today. The difference is that leaders and public figures like Wayne and Sinatra eventually found ways to disagree without destroying each other or the country. Their grudging respect, developed after the heat of anger cooled, offers a template. Acknowledge your opponent's sincerity even when you think they're wrong. Stand up for your values without trying to silence others. And remember that the person across from you politically is still your countryman, not your enemy. In Hollywood, the Wayne-Sinatra divide never fully healed. Both men remained symbols of their respective worldviews until they died. But they coexisted, they maintained professional respect, and they proved that people with completely opposite political views can occupy the same industry, the same country, and even the same ballroom without it ending in violence. That's a lesson worth remembering, especially now. If this story of political division, near violence, and eventual respect made you think about how we handle disagreements today, hit that like button and subscribe for more Hollywood stories that reveal timeless truths about human nature and American culture. Who do you think was right, John Wayne's traditional values or Frank Sinatra's progressive vision? Or is the real answer that both had valid points? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And remember, disagreeing with someone doesn't make them your enemy. It just makes them someone with different views. The question is whether we have the maturity to respect that difference, even when we're absolutely convinced they're wrong. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.